Mhm.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna kind of get started. So let's see over here. Okay, so hello, my name's Diondraya. I am here to talk about some of my experiences with college, sort of finding my way to entrepreneurship, and then what are some sort of things that y'all can start thinking about if you're interested in learning about entrepreneurship or pursuing entrepreneurship. And as a quick note, the sort of directors asked me to think about some resources, and I actually did come up with one or two that I remember being helpful to me. So I will share those at the end. Um, oh my God, I'm gonna have to kill that fly. So the first thing, so I'll just give you sort of a little background about me. So I just graduated from UCLA in this past June. I was a psychobiology major, and a lot of people ask what that is, so I'll just kind of say it so you don't have to ask. Basically, psychobiology is a really cool sort of fusion major that we have at UCLA, and it basically is a combination of biology and psychology, as you probably could have guessed. But a lot of the concepts are really about sort of a more psychological side of neuroscience. So in terms of neuroscience, a lot of that is based around what is every part of the brain and sort of what does it do and how does it interact with the body. A lot of what psychobiology is what is the function of the pieces of the brain and how does that interact with the way that we as humans sort of move about in the world and socialize and feel and communicate things, which is super interesting to me because I definitely didn't consider myself someone who's interested in hard science, but I got a lot of good hard science experience through that. So I had a lot of fun and really like versatile learning experience. In the process of sort of learning about that, I sort of found myself in entrepreneurship, and I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. But sort of that's where Mindset and Milestones came about. And today, it sort of started with me writing a workbook to teach entrepreneurial skills to girls. And now we've sort of moved into a space where we're communicating those messages, working on some workshops that people can download and give in their communities. So sort of looking into some different options, but very much the premise is sort of teaching entrepreneurial skills to young women. And I'll get into why I picked young women as well in a little bit. And then throughout all of this, I also found a really strong passion for education. So I did some work as an education research assistant, and I learned so much about how much there really is to learn about the way that we educate and the systems that allow education to happen, and how much work needs to be done, not just in research, but also taking research and sort of pitching it in essence to governments and different sort of entities that have power over how we take research and turn it into policy that actually benefits our schools. So I'll be starting my PhD in education to sort of explore some of those different concepts in about a month. So sort of get into my road to entrepreneurship and how I found it, and then where the passion for it developed. The first thing is I really just stumbled upon it. So at UCLA, we have a entrepreneurship office, which I didn't know about at the time. And I found, I was just looking for the scholarship office at the time, and I was thinking about some ways for me to, get some extra money. And I stumbled upon the office, and I just kind of walked in and asked them, like, what do y'all do here? It's called Startup UCLA. And, they explained to me like what they do and how they help students start businesses and organizations and things of that nature. And I was super excited because I really didn't have any ideas, but it was just nice to know that it was there. And so over the next couple weeks after that, my slides keep over the next couple weeks after that, I was just becoming really frustrated with sort of seeing the lack of representation of women in so many spaces in society, but particularly ones that are, deemed as prestigious or powerful in one sense or another. And so I was thinking about, like, how do we start communicating the skills that young women will need to sort of be in these spaces that are male dominated, and know that their ideas have value, that they should be there, that they deserve to be there, and that they have things to offer. And so it was at the very beginning me going to Startup UCLA and saying, I just don't know what to do. I feel like no one is solving this problem adequately, and if they are, it's only focused on STEM. And while I believe STEM is amazing, I've taken lots of STEM courses, I love math, like all of those things, I think just like people in general, not every girl wants to be in STEM, and that's okay. But I think that there's ways to communicate these same skills. And so that's sort of how entrepreneurship became the vehicle that I wanted to use to communicate the skills of being able to advocate for yourself and knowing your worth and sharing your ideas and pitching to people, because you use all of those skills in many, many areas of life. And I felt like it was a way to help girls be successful and start having those conversations before it was time to actually use the skills. So that's sort of where it came from, is, you know, entrepreneurship as like a skill set. And then from there, I sort of started to immerse myself in like the entrepreneurship ecosystem at UCLA. I got several internships. I became an entrepreneurship minor, so I took lots of classes, and just really learned a lot from really successful entrepreneurs. I did some pitch competitions with companies that I worked for, had some really great successes and some really tragic and now thankfully funny failures that I've learned a lot from and have been able to share with other people. So I can get into that a little bit more if anyone has questions about sort of how I found mentors and internships that allowed me to sort of grow in terms of my tangible knowledge of entrepreneurship and sort of like more practical skills as opposed to like the theory that you learn a lot in classes. And then I also had some personal sort of, you know, entrepreneurial ventures. So I dabbled in soap making for at one point in time.
Soap making?
Soap making, yeah, like making bars of soap. And so that was, you know, something that me and my friends started doing as sort of like a business idea in our dorm room. I did freelance makeup for a while, which probably was one of the more successful sort of micro ventures that I did. So, you know, graduations and proms and engagement photos, just all kinds of things. And then, you know, throughout all of these experiences, me learning about entrepreneurship, sort of having some experiences of my own, talking to a lot of really successful entrepreneurs, I sort of distilled all of the lessons that I learned, the processes that they go through into the workbook that is now Mindset and Milestones. And it took me about 2 years to write it, but bear in mind, most of that 2 years was me sort of writing in the process of learning. So it was really fun for me to kind of take everything that I was learning and sort of distill it in a form that I thought could be helpful to other young women. So I developed an MVP for that, which was, for those who might not have heard of it before, an MVP is called it's a minimum viable product, which is basically just sort of a first version, or, you know, sometimes it's not even a version, sometimes it's just a video, but it's basically something that demonstrates what your product is going to do. And it's generally used to get information from potential customers. So I took sort of the MVP of my workbook. At the time, it was a really ugly sort of PDF that I designed with, what was it? Actually, I think it was Google Slides. I like took the sort of slide parameters and just made it like 8.5 by 11. And then I printed out the entire thing with my printer at home and took it to Staples and got it bound. And then I went to a school and I said to their entrepreneurship teacher, because there's very few schools that already have entrepreneurship as a class, and I took it to him and I said, what do you think about this? He's like, this is amazing, I'll buy 15. I was like, great. So I'd say like I didn't need a lot of like initial investment because I was able to make money just starting with my MVP and sort of growing from that place. Like he paid me in advance, and then I went and sort of found someone to print them for me, and then actually got, you know, like a nice print on them. And today I'd say I'm on like my 7th iteration of what the workbook originally looked like. So it never stops. You're always growing and learning new things and changing and making it better. But I think that's part of it that I really enjoy. So I can pause here really quick. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I just mentioned? Okay, I just got one question. Oh yes, I remember you mentioning this one. So what are 3 things you wish you'd known about entrepreneurship in high school? So I'm actually gonna save this one because I'm gonna talk about this a little bit towards the end, but definitely getting to that one for sure. Any other questions about anything related to anything really? If not, I'm going to keep going. So these are sort of three parts of entrepreneurship as a skill set that I think would be probably most important no matter what you choose to do in terms of entrepreneurship. So we'll kind of get started on problem solving. So I'll just kind of give you sort of a brief overview. I would say my favorite definition of what is entrepreneurship, it is from a Harvard Business School professor, and it basically says entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard for resources currently controlled. So what that basically means is entrepreneurship is you pursuing an opportunity, and that opportunity could be monetary, it could be impact driven, it could be a gap in an industry that you feel like you could fill, any of those things, but you're pursuing it and you're not necessarily sure how you're going to do it. Maybe you don't have all the money that you need, maybe you don't have all of the resources or the connections that you think you should have, but you're doing it anyway. And there's a lot of trial and error that comes with that, with doing things that people haven't done before, or taking on challenges that have sort of proven to be difficult, but it definitely is something that I think people who have an entrepreneurial mindset sort of excites them. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But with problem solving specifically, I really believe that true entrepreneurs aim to solve a problem when they're addressing and when they're starting their business and sort of addressing a need. And sometimes those problems are, huge problems. Sometimes they're really small problems. So you think about like a lot of huge companies that are started today. We think about like Uber and Amazon. They didn't necessarily know that they were going to become the massive sort of insanely kind of industry changing companies that they are. But at the time that they started, like Uber, I believe, was just sort of people in a building who thought that they could sort of ride share with each other. Instead of sort of it being like a replacement for taxis, it was more of like, how can we make carpooling more efficient? And then Amazon, it was actually started as just a bookstore, like offering books online. And so it's really overwhelming for a lot of people to consider the fact that, like, if I want to start a company, it needs to be big. I need to have all of these sort of massive goals. And it really can just start from something small that you find inconvenient. That's where many of the best companies have begun. And then the last thing I'll say about problem solving is that entrepreneurship allows for a lot of versatility, because the kinds of problems that you solve, your goal doesn't have to be large. And sort of a caveat to the previous point is that if you want to be an entrepreneur who is a small business owner, there's plenty of businesses who choose to stay small. You think about like the local Italian restaurant around the corner. It's amazing. The lasagna is the best thing I've ever had. Why have they not had a second franchise? It's really about creating the lifestyle that you want. And so for a lot of those local business owners, they want to be able to feed their families and do what they love and have time to enjoy that. And then you have people who want to start an empire, and they're okay if that consumes their entire life. And there's no right or wrong answer, but I love the fact that entrepreneurship allows you to discover and decide what you want for yourself. The next thing that I think is an important skill about in terms of entrepreneurship is building your network. So I'm sure we've all heard of LinkedIn and things similar to that allow you to connect with one another. And so if anyone's like interested specifically in some like tangible tips on networking, I can get into those, but these are just sort of some general points that I think are important to start doing. Finding mentors is so key in learning about the things that textbooks don't tell you, about the things that you can't find in YouTube videos. Like asking someone who has been where you want to go can absolutely be a game changer. It certainly has been for me. I would not have done anything if I didn't have mentors to sort of be there for me and kind of show me what are some directions that you can start in, who can you contact if you don't know what to do, sending resources to you. All of this is super vital. And I would say actively reaching out to people and sort of asking for and inviting mentorship into your life and your experiences will definitely change a lot of your outcomes. The other is collaborating with people who are like-minded. So it's awesome that you all are here and sort of in the spaces of other people who care about just getting more prepared for life and learning new things. But I'd say that like this is super important in terms of like your general sort of joining organizations, but also in terms of the friends that you keep. Energies are wildly infectious, and being around people who have an energy that says I can do things, it's just a matter of how, is going to take you so far. Having people who are there and who can hold you accountable, probably the only way a lot of entrepreneurs make it. You find that a lot of solo founders have a really hard time. And so they actually have a harder time getting investment a lot of the times, like from venture capitalists, from angel investors, because it's just a really hard thing to do. And so, you know, those people definitely have to have a strong board of advisors. They have to have great connections and sort of resources that let investors know that if I'm giving you money, that I'm not going to walk away when things get hard. Like I have people around me, I have resources and input that I can keep if I don't know what to do. And I'm just looking at some of the questions that popped up. Oh, awesome. So I can just answer a couple of these. So the first question was about why should high school students have a LinkedIn? I think that if you're on Instagram and you're on Facebook, you might as well be on a platform that's geared towards helping you successful. First of all, there's a lot of inspiration that comes from LinkedIn that you typically don't get when you're on Instagram and Facebook. And I use all of the above, so this is not at all judgment. But I'll say that like LinkedIn, when you're sort of scrolling through a feed, you see a lot of people who are, you know, getting jobs and sharing information from hiring managers and highlighting internship opportunities. So this is a space for you to connect in ways that are distinctly advantageous to you making connections in your career path. So I would say that like just starting to build and learning how to put together an effective LinkedIn page that sort of communicates what you're doing and that you're actively involved, but also just learning how to communicate yourself professionally. It's a great first step.
As connections, would you like, you know, when you click connect and you like
Mhm.
become friends or whatnot, would you
Yeah.
connect with someone that you are kind of, you don't know who they are, or would it only be like just your school
I
peers?
connect with people I don't know all the time.
Okay.
And I think that it's valuable because this is one thing I'll say. I'm a very big fan of cold emailing. And if you've never heard of that before, cold emailing is essentially sending an email to someone who doesn't know you at all. And I've gotten internships through cold emailing. I've created positions for myself through cold emailing. And it's sort of the same concept on LinkedIn. If there's someone who is doing something that you find interesting, send them a connection invite. And I would say this is a sort of added tip to that. If you're going to send a connection request to someone you don't know, please make sure to send a message attached to that. So like when you click connect and they ask like, do you want to send a message? You always have to send a message. Just because if they don't know you, they need a reason to want to connect with you. So a lot of the times it could be as simple as, I really love the work that you're doing. And if you have time, it would be great to chat about the experiences that you've had, you know, in this field. I'm a high school student and I'm really trying more about it. So if you had the time, that would be super helpful. Like people are so much more willing to help than I think we give them credit for. So to answer your question, yes, I would connect with people I don't know. Just make sure you're respectful and you communicate what it is that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then let's say, what do you put on your LinkedIn account if you don't have work experience? So your clubs, like if you're in organizations, if you're involved in organizations in high school, those are absolutely valid. Like put those on your LinkedIn because they're roles that you have, they're things that you gain experience from. And remember, you're in high school. No one expects for you to have work experience yet. If they do, they're lying. I don't know what else to tell you. Like there's no reason to expect that you have industry experience and you don't have a high school diploma yet. So your club experiences are absolutely valid. Any scholarships that you might have won, any competitions that you've done, all of that volunteer service is a huge one. Make sure that that's on there. Like all of this is completely relevant and is just as valid as work experience, especially given the places that you are in your life. So hopefully that helps. when networking, how do you know when someone might be a liability or be a liability dead weight? That's an interesting question. So I'll say, like, in terms of a person that you've sort of connected with and you have sort of chatted with them a little bit and you're now finding that they're not really helpful to you, I would say, like, continue to be respectful in whatever current conversation you're having with that person. And then, you just don't have to reach out again. I would say there's no negative to having someone connected to your network, because you never know where they'll end up or what kind of expertise they'll develop in the future. So I would say the only thing about that is to just be respectful and don't burn bridges if you don't have to. Um, yeah,
Sorry,
I'm
just
not
to
sure, like, more
interrupt.
specific part of
How do you know if you have to burn a bridge down? Like, what are red flags?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with, like, cancel culture. Yes,
Oh God, I hate it when people say that. I don't
exactly.
get it, man.
Exactly. So, like, I personally think that it's really hard to judge an entire individual based on one thing they've done or said. Um, I'll say this, there's a difference between mistakes and sort of habitual behavior. So if you are actively sort of connecting with, involved with, attached to a person that has demonstrated sort of habitual behavior that's negative, that's not in line with your values as a person, then it might be worth it to say, I'm no longer connected with you. Because even though you have something valuable or you have a future that might be helpful to me, I don't think you're the kind of person that I want to be involved with. So I'd say that it's more about that than about, like, whether or not they're advantageous to you at any particular
Right.
moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What was your first attempt at networking, building a network? Oh, okay, great. So I think that I was probably later to that game than most people, but I didn't start that till I was in college. But that being said, like, LinkedIn was still very, like, small and not a super big thing when I was in high school. So no one was really interacting with it at all, especially not sort of at this age. But when I was in college, like, I definitely just started to reach out to people. And one thing I highly recommend, I don't know if your school has one, but maybe find some different opportunities or organizations. If your school has an alumni program where alumni sort of mentor or match with people, do that. I did that my freshman year when I was at UCLA, and my first mentor quite, like, literally catapulted my ability to sort of move into this space. She was an entrepreneur. I wanted to learn from her experiences, and she was wildly helpful to me in figuring out what were the steps I need to take. How do I send cold emails? And then I did the same thing in my internship. So I would say, like, if you have internships, really move around your office. Talk to the people that are in the space. Ask if you can take them to coffee, like, learn about what they're doing. This is all sort of good with building rapport with people, so that when you leave an internship, you still feel comfortable with the connections that you made. Another thing I'll say about that, send sort of checkups. Like, I still connect with teachers that I had in high school that were super helpful to me. I send maybe, an email to them, like, once a year, seeing how they're doing, what they're up to. Like, sometimes I'll go back and volunteer, but just making sure that you're sort of keeping lines of communication open once you have opportunities to meet new people is really, really helpful. And networking is a lot simpler than we make it sound. Like, networking feels very official. When people hear it, they think about, like, awkward mixers where they're walking around trying to figure out who to talk to. And networking is really just communicating with people and building relationships, and you do it every single day. So just know that you can do it the same way that you do friendships. You have to communicate with people for them to know that you care, that you're interested. Just like your friendships die off if you stop talking to each other, a lot of the times it's the same with your business relationships. So you have to reach out to people, you have to invite opportunities to connect, and make sure that's something you're actively doing. Like, networking takes active effort. And I think sometimes people forget that. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to keep going to the next one after I answer, like, this last question, because I think it's pretty related. What advice do you have for doing free work or commissions? Is it worth it? So in terms of, like, free internships, like internships where you're not paid, I would say there's lots of conversation on sort of a national level about whether that's even ethical. And I'm not going to give my opinion on it, but what I will say is that if you have the ability, like if you, are, you know, in a position where your parents are able to take care of you and you do have a lot of the things that you need paid for, internships often give you the opportunity to do things that you are not necessarily qualified to get paid for. Does that make sense? So if you have the opportunity to intern, like the first company that I interned for, it was unpaid, but I mean, I was giving pitches and coming up with sort of our infrastructure for like all of our inventory. Like there was so much that I was not at all qualified to do, but because I was unpaid and willing to learn, I basically had a lot of free will in terms of what do I really want to give my time to. And so given that your employers, especially if it's unpaid, know that you're not receiving money as compensation, they will try, at least if you're with a good internship, so do your research, they will actively try to make sure that you're learning new things and gaining really concrete experience. So if you have the ability to take a free internship, to take an internship in which you are unpaid, and there's nothing that is paid that you can find that's allowing you the same, opportunities, I would do it. All right, I'm going to move on to the last slide is creating opportunity for yourself. So this is a huge part of entrepreneurship. It's a great skill that you can sort of use anywhere. I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs at this point, and I've also networked with a fair amount of hiring managers and people who are CEOs of companies and things of that nature. And one thing that I've learned from them is that you, even within the context of a company, can reach out to, Uber or Amazon or, a smaller company, like whoever. And if you have something that you want to do, I would suggest, like, for the stages that y'all are at right now, like small businesses would be a great choice, but reach out and offer your services. Like, what is it that you have a skill set doing? Because odds are, especially if they're a small business, like, recognize a need that they have and then let them know how you can fill it. Like, there's so many different ways for you to create opportunities for yourself. That could be starting a business, but it could also be letting someone know you have a different skill set that you see that they could use from you. And there's jobs that are created this way all the time. Companies from, like the smallest of small businesses to SpaceX accept submissions that you don't necessarily get an invitation to send in. So I would advise you to just be thinking about, like, what are the things that I have to offer? What are my skill sets? And then finding some places, some businesses, organizations, and just opportunities for you to leverage those and gain new experience for yourself. I think that it's very much overlooked how much you have the power to sort of influence opportunity if you're able to position it the correct way. So if you have any questions about that, like, sending in a cold email or sort of submitting a proposal, in a sense, of an internship that you'd like to do that someone maybe hasn't posted a submission for, more than happy to kind of talk about that a little bit. But I'll look at the questions right now. What are some good experiences to mention on an application interview, and which ones are waste of time, too common, don't make you stand out? So I think that this is very much relative to how many experiences you have. Like, if you have done one or two things, that's fine. Talk about those one or two things. It doesn't matter if they're too general or someone else has done them, because it's what you have. And I think that talking about what you gained from it is more important than what the actual position was. So, everyone's an ASB. I was in ASB when I was in high school. I had a great time. But what I'll say is that when you talk about specifically what you learned, that's what gets people's attention. Because those are the skill sets that they're looking for. It's not necessarily important that you had a position. They want to know what you learned from it and how you can take those skills and translate them to their work environment. So I'd say, like, focus on the skill set and not necessarily whether or not the thing that you've done is important or not. If you learn something valuable, it's important. other questions? Otherwise, we can sort of keep it going. Oh, I think I had one last point here. Ask what you, oh yeah, so this is kind of similar to like reaching out to people. It's always important to sort of lead with the value that you bring, but also make sure that you're communicating how that value is beneficial to them and what outcomes it will give them. If you show people sort of, it's kind of this concept with, it's pretty standard in like marketing, like thinking about products or services. People don't care about what it is or how cool it is for the most part. What they care about is what it does for them. And so when you're sort of positioning yourself as someone who wants to be an intern, or you're applying for a job, or you're looking for a position of any kind really, and you're sort of submitting a proposal on like how you think that could be helpful, it is so important to communicate not just what you want to do, not just why you have the ability to do it, but what value it's going to bring to them. So if you are interested in pursuing social media, for example, I'm just making things up right now, and you want to learn about social media marketing, it would be best to approach a small business who doesn't have any Instagram followers, or who doesn't really know how to sort of share the opportunities that they're offering on social media. If you bring that to them and say, this could increase your customer base, this is what they care about. It's like, why do we want to spend time going through this? Like, what is the value that it brings? And so entrepreneurship, getting internships with startup companies, you really get to sort of crystallize those skills around how to position value. And that's a skill that you can use for positioning yourself, as well as if you decide to have an organization and, sell or build a product, service, anything of that nature. So now we'll think about like, what are some things that y'all can do right now to get ready for entrepreneurship if you decide to open a business, or if you're just looking to sort of gain entrepreneurial skills. And so these are sort of the three that I think are most vital to what you're focusing on right now. So the first one is sort of, have a lot of different experiences and find something that you really love. Spending time with something that you love and sort of learning how to become good at it, or to, learn things about it that most people don't know. These are skills, and they're skills that you can leverage. But since you're in high school, to me at least, there's no point in sort of developing skills that you necessarily don't care about. Like, those are the things that stand out on college admissions and in interviews. People who actually care. And it's easy to tell when someone's doing something because it's boosting their resume or making them, feel like they're a better applicant. And genuine passion and sort of commitment to a love of something is so much more salient than having a resume that's full of stuff. I'll answer that question in a bit. So that's what I would say is the first thing is just find something you really love and give it some dedicated effort to learn how to get better at it and sort of develop it as a skill. For me, that was, at the time, it was makeup. I probably spent half of high school learning, everything I could about makeup, and I got really, really good at it. And it was just something that I enjoyed. It was something I did for fun, and eventually it was something that I could make money at. But at the time, it was just me doing something I loved, and it was something I talked about on my college admissions, and I talk about in interviews, because it sort of shows them my ability to care about something, which sadly is a skill that a lot of people lack these days. And so it really does matter and helps people remember you. The second thing is to set stretch goals. So I am a firm believer in, if you have accomplished one of your goals, set another one. And if you feel too confident that you can get it done, make it bigger. There is no reason not to push yourself, because for, a lot of us, at least I can speak for myself. I have parents who have supported me and been there for me. And if I went really big on a goal and failed, I knew that my life wasn't really going to change. So this is sort of the best time to look into new things, to take risks, and to set big goals. And if you don't hit them, then, so be it. You learn something from it and you move forward. But this is not the time to be comfortable. Make yourself uncomfortable and set goals that really push you and make you work harder than you thought you could. And the last one is to keep accountability partners. So there are people in your life who you go to for fun. I know we all have them. I have friends who I just talk to and we just have a great time. Like that's, sort of the extent of our relationship, and that's okay. But I also have friends who really keep me accountable. You said you were going to write this blog post. Did you do it yet? Like you were looking to sort of have a new version of your book finished. Are you halfway there? Having those people in your life and sort of communicating to them that you're looking for that out of them and that you want to be the same for them is really can keep you motivated and sort of push you when your own drive and your own desire is not enough, because those days will come if they already haven't. And so that's sort of most of what I had to say. Like I said, I love questions, and so I want this to be as beneficial to you all as possible. So I'll just sort of get into some of the ones that I see here. What are some strong action verbs for professional resumes? Yeah, so you actually, I think there was a document shared with you about that. It's like it's like a list of verbs that you can use for resumes. So I can actually grab that if you want, and you can share that with everyone on the call. But that's definitely a super valid point for resumes. You want to use action verbs like organized, customer relations files, or I don't know, like managed data around like social media engagement, like whatever it is you want to talk about what you actively did. I also, as a sidebar, would stay away from I. Like if you're going to say I manage, just say manage, like skip that. Your resume is one page for the most part, is what people will want you to submit. So you want to use as much of that space as effectively as possible. Leave out words you don't need, remove fluff, and just sort of get straight to the point and make sure people understand exactly what you gained from it, because the goal is not for it to sound pretty. You want it to sound professional, but you want it to do the job. So if you're reading your resume and it feels too fluffy, or you're not really grasping what the skills were, you need to delete it and try again. Okay, let's see. What do you want? I'm going to answer that question last, what I want to do with my degree and sort of my goal for the future. I will see that as like our topper. How do you keep yourself accountable to reach your stretch goals? So I wish I could show you right now, but I have a huge whiteboard in my room, and I basically put my goals on there at probably 3 months out. So I'm always looking forward to like, what are the next steps for me in sort of a broader sense, and are the things that I'm doing daily moving me in that correct direction? Another thing that I do, I have a Trello board that basically sort of lists like things that I want to do in the near future, but probably, a month or so out. And then I also have a daily to-do list, and that keeps me accountable just on a day-to-day basis. But I sort of, at least I would say every month or so, I check in to make sure that all of those things are aligned. Are the things that I've been doing every day for the last month moving me towards those goals on my whiteboard that are 3, 4, 5 months out? If not, there's things that need to be reevaluated. And also, if there's something I'm really sort of, trying to push myself to do, I will actually verbalize it to someone. So I'll tell one of my mentors, hey, if you could just text me on, so today's July 31st, if you could just text me on like August 25th, I want to have this thing done, and I just need to make sure that I get it done. Something about saying it out loud to someone makes it feel more real. And so I definitely encourage that if you sort of have some things that you want to work on, maybe a blog you want to write, a podcast you want to do, whatever it is, tell someone about it, because 9 times out of 10, that's going to make you more accountable to actually do it, because you've now made it real in some sense or another. Oh my God, this darn fly. And then what else is here? Okay, where can we find mentors that we don't know, and how do we find people to go email? So first place, LinkedIn is a great resource. However, I'll share like a quick story. When I was first starting my workbook, I wanted to get an official like legal copyright. I had no idea how to do this. I don't know. And so I was like, well, what is a logical first step? I went on Google and I searched for lawyers in Los Angeles. I found a lawyer that I thought seemed, relatively decent. She had a good background. I picked specifically a woman because what I was doing was female focused, and so hopefully that might encourage her to actually respond to me, as well as I picked someone who graduated from UCLA. These are sort of very like calculated decisions that I made in order to sort of try to get the most effective outcome. And she actually responded to me right away, gave me a discount, and then actually became a mentor in terms of like legal questions that I had. So you might not have like necessarily connections in terms of like people who graduated from your high school, but you might. So I think a good place to start is to go to your school and contact anyone who might have access to alumni and ask if there's like a catalog that you could look through, or if there's people who sort of routinely volunteer their time or their resources with the school, because that like people are very connected to sort of the schools that they went to, and just by virtue of you being a student, they care about your success. It's pretty much as simple as that most of the time. So if you find people who already seem to care about sort of making you successful, then just sort of send them an email. I think those people that demonstrate a desire to sort of help other young people move forward are ones that are most likely to respond, as well as like if you're looking for a specific skill in say finance, reach out to some nonprofits, because if they're nonprofits, think about like, you know, financial literacy programs and things of that nature. They probably are comprised of people who care about young people learning about finance. So you have, again, higher probability that they would actually respond to you because they've already demonstrated in one way or another that they care about this. Hopefully that was helpful. What else here? Would you agree that you can create a profitable business out of any passion, like follow your passion doctrine? I won't say any, but I'd say that like there's very few that I think you can't, because it's really about finding the right person. I'll give you an example. One of the girls that's in a program that I'm running, she is interested in bullet journaling. And so she thought about like, well, I have a lot of friends who really want to bullet journal, but they don't want to draw grids. It's too hard. They don't want to learn calligraphy. Like it's just, you know, it's sort of very overwhelming for them. So she had an idea to make an app that basically sort of has a sort of catalog of all the information that you could need to bullet journal, from what pens to buy and what are some good starter resources and videos to watch, all of that, so that her friends could, you know, find the information that they're looking for. And then if you think about like down the line, if she got, let's say, you know, 15, 20,000 users, you become a very viable candidate for advertising dollars. Like there's so many creative ways to monetize your passions if you just find a way to frame it as a problem and figure out who it's a problem for. There's 9 times out of 10 going to be a way to make it happen. So I'd say not always, but more often than not, that is the case, that you can turn your passion into a business. Let's see here. Okay, how do you get bigger accounts, businesses, connections to care about what you're doing? Finding a lead is so important. And when I say lead, so there's sort of what's called a sales lead, which is basically finding a client who might be interested in you. But then there's also like a lead isn't a foot in the door. So my mentors have been super helpful for me. One of my first sales was to an organization called the Women Founders Network. And I actually was connected with them through one of the person who ran one of my current internships at the time. I had communicated with her. We talked weekly. I told her about what I was up to. And when she came across people that could help me, she immediately sent them my email address and made email introductions for me. And so just them having someone to vouch for you can get someone to at least pay attention to what you have to say. The rest of it is on you to actually have something beneficial to show them. But if you do what you're supposed to, then those connections that you have are a great way to get your foot into places that you probably wouldn't be able to get to respond to you otherwise. And I'll say that that sort of comes back to that other networking point, that if you're not communicating, if you're not keeping lines open and sharing what you're doing and sort of being like an active participant in the networking relationship, people won't feel comfortable doing that for you, because either they don't feel like they know you well enough, or they don't know what you're working on because you never told them. So it's important to share this information with people so that when they come across opportunities to help you, they already know how to do that. We have any other questions? Did I miss anything?
I think that's it. That's it for the chat room. Does anyone else
Okay,
have
great.
any other questions?
And if not, then I'll finish off with the like, what do I want to do next? Cool. Okay, so I guess I will kind of give a brief like outline, because honestly there's so much that could be done. Like I could definitely keep going with entrepreneurship. I think for me though, I'll probably end up finding myself in policy work with education because I'm super interested in education research. I actually would love to be a part of making entrepreneurship a class that is offered in high schools across the country. I think that the skills you learn in terms of entrepreneurship, as well as sort of the integration of like financial literacy information, is the kind of thing that we're missing in terms of like tangible learning that happens in high school. But the thing about it is that we already know that the research tells us these things are beneficial. It's just not happening. So it's less a question of do we know it's real and more of a question of how do we convince policymakers that it's worth the money. And so that's something that I'm super interested in. It's like taking entrepreneurial skills of pitching and framing arguments, and propositioning value to help people take their research and turn it into something that makes real change. Oh, and I see a question. Thank you so much. I'm glad that some of you found this very helpful. Very happy about that. Are people in your life, such as teachers or friends, parents, valid resources to jumpstart something you have? Oh, I talk about this a little bit in my workbook, but I will basically say, do not fall into a trap of convenience is number one. Just because someone is there and they support you does not mean that you should go into business with them or listen to what they say necessarily. I'll say this, listen, it doesn't mean that you have to do what they say. If you want to start a business with a friend, think very, very prudently about the kind of person that friend is. Like I mentioned before, I have friends that are fun to go to parties with and, watch movies with, and we just have a good time. And then I have those friends that are very responsible, very serious, very engaged thinkers and very hard workers. And you have to know what kind of person that you're dealing with before you get into business. And if you do decide to go into business with a friend, this is sort of the last point I'll give on that, make sure that you both have, even if it's just a written piece of paper, like agree on what happens if it doesn't work out, especially if you start to make money. This is a much easier conversation to have before you've made any money than it is to have once you have, $10,000 in the bank from the efforts. Like, what happens now? Now this person is saying, well, I did more work than you, so I think it should be 60-40. All of this, these are conversations to really think super strategically about before you decide to make those decisions. That being said, it can totally happen and it could absolutely be successful. Just make sure that you come to some sort of agreement. To answer your question, yes, it can literally just be a piece of paper. Of course, you could come up with like with a contract, but I wouldn't hire a lawyer, especially if you haven't made any money yet. Just go online and there's some sort of basic what's called like partnership agreements. But honestly, like if it ever came to a place where you were making so much money and then things went crazy that you needed to go to a lawyer, if you have both you typed up this quick document and says we are 50-50 in this partnership, and all proceeds moving forward will be split evenly between the two of us unless other arrangements are in writing, confirmed and discussed, and then you both date and sign that, that's legally binding. So just make sure that you sort of talk with one another and are on the same page. But if you're sort of maybe a couple years out from now, you have some investment dollars and you're really starting a business, absolutely hire a lawyer, and sort of get into a very sort of ironclad, this is exactly what happens in this event, in this event and this event. And like that is really helpful to just make sure that all of your bases are covered, especially like if you start a business and then investors start getting involved, like a lawyer absolutely needs to be a part of the conversation so that everybody is fairly and sort of equally protected in the event that one person decides to leave, they don't like it anymore, anything like that. Would you recommend trying to get internship connections if we are interested in, even if we're not sure if we want? Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Even if it's something you don't know if you want to pursue, just try it. Because I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday. You learn so much from internships in terms of what you don't like as well as what you do. So if you get an internship in finance because you think you might like finance and then you realize you hate finance, that is not time wasted. You learned what you don't want to do, and now when you go to college, you're not wondering whether or not you should be a biz econ major. You shouldn't. And that's super helpful because there's a million other things to choose from. Don't settle for something you don't love. How useful are social media platforms such as Entrepreneurship, Instagram in the field of business? Wildly useful. I would say if you're in a B2B business, which is business to business, like your customer is another business, like if you're selling restaurant equipment, for example, your business is selling to other businesses. Connections, platforms like LinkedIn or just kind of emailing organizations will probably be your best bet. If you are in the consumer space, which is B2C, so business to consumer, then it's super helpful for you to be on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, all of these spaces that are very much consumer facing, like, you know, regular folks, because they can see what you're doing. And honestly, these days, people really do look to social media for social proof that you exist. So if you're a new business and you're trying to sort of share information and sell something, I think that it's this day and age, if you're selling to consumers, it's almost mandatory that you be on social media in some way. Great.
Okay, I think that is the end of all the questions.